21 Jump Street, the battle for Fort Sumter, and the death of a president are all on this day. Welcome back to On This Day. Today's date is April 12th, 2022. It is the 102nd day of the year. There are 263 days left in 2022. It is the 15th Tuesday in the 16th week and the 24th day of spring. And if today's your birthday, you're an Aries. Just like Lady Gaga, Robert Downey Jr., Jackie Chan, Leonardo da Vinci, Hugh Hefner, and Elton John. So many more. Today is National Big Wind Day. The day commemorates the recording of the highest natural wind gust measured on the Earth's surface. It was on the afternoon of April 12, 1934, that winds blowing 231 miles per hour were recorded by the Mount Washington Observatory. Mount Washington is the highest peak in the northeastern United States at 6,288 feet. Mount Washington is in New Hampshire, and it is said to be the most notable mountain east of the Mississippi River. All right. Let's see what else April 12th has given us. 1861, the American Civil War. The Battle of Fort Sumter goes down. The war begins with the Confederate forces firing on Fort Sumter in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. Fort Sumter is still there. You could take a ferry out there and check it out. It's right at the mouth of the Charleston harbor. The battle went on for almost 2 days when the soldiers at Fort Sumter finally surrendered. Nobody was killed, but this did kick off the Civil War, which turns out being the bloodiest conflict in American history. 1865, more Civil War stuff. Mobile, Alabama falls to the Union Army. You're probably wondering why so many things happened in April for the Civil War. Well, weather was a big part of war back then. There wasn't a lot you could do between like November and May in most of the country. I mean, they could, but they didn't have really good winter gear at the time, so it was hard to maneuver and keep your troops fed. 1937, Sir Frank Whittle tests the first jet engine. The first jet engine that was designed to power an aircraft at Rugby, England. 1945, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt dies in office. Vice President Harry S. Truman becomes the president upon Roosevelt's death. FDR was one of our most popular presidents. I mean, the whole country came out to vote for him his first time around. I should say almost the entire country. If you look at the electoral map, he only lost Pennsylvania, Delaware, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. He won every other state, from California to Florida. That was in 1932. In 1936, it got even bigger. The only states he didn't win were Vermont and Maine. If you take George Washington out of the running, his two elections, because it was a little bit different back then, that's the second best margin of victory. He won 523 electoral college votes versus 8. The only one that did better than him was James Monroe. His earlier time, he was actually in 1820. He won 231. The other dude won 1 electoral college vote. Now, by the time the 1940 election came around, he was still, by most standards, one of the most popular presidents we've ever had, but some of the states weren't on board. He actually lost 10 of the 48 at the time. Hawaii and Alaska weren't on board yet, so he still won 38 states. And then during the war, he dies. And in comes poor Harry S. Truman, who has to follow the most popular president we've ever seen, after George Washington, I guess. In my opinion, I think Harry S. Truman is one of the best presidents we've ever had because he had to make the toughest decision ever, which was dropping 2 atomic bombs on Japan. I read a book years ago and it talked about how he just struggled with the thought of doing this, that the general said this is the best way, and all the things they laid out, we could lose hundreds of thousands of soldiers trying to defeat Japan because they will never stop unless they are completely defeated. So he decided this was the best way to go. He also came to the conclusion that the way Japan was conducting themselves at war with POWs and the civilian populations, that they weren't playing nice. So why should the United States play nice with them? And he pulled the trigger on the bombs. 1983, Harold Washington is elected as the first black mayor of Chicago. 1992, the Euro Disney Resort officially opens. They eventually changed the name to Disneyland Paris. I've never been there, but I've heard quite a few people say it's the worst of all the Disneylands or all the Disney parks. I heard Tokyo Disney is pretty cool. I grew up not too far from the original Disneyland and used to go there all the time. When my kids were younger, we had season tickets. It was great. Premiered on April 12th, 1987, 21 Jump Street. Who didn't watch that back in the 80s and early 90s? It starred Johnny Depp, Richard Greco, Greco, whatever his name is, Holly Robinson, Peter DeLuise, Michael DeLuise, Frederick Forrest, Dustin Nguyen, Stephen Williams. That was a pretty good show. It was very popular, and it helped put Fox on the map. I don't know if you guys remember that far back, but Fox was pretty much a new station in the mid-'80s. They only had things like The Simpsons, 21 Jump Street, Married with Children came around after a while, The Tracy Ullman Show. But if you don't remember 21 Jump Street, it was young-looking police officers from 21 Jump Street pose as high schoolers to uncover criminal activity going on between teenagers before, during, and after class. The show was remade into a movie of the same name and a sequel called 22 Jump Street. There were a total of 103 episodes, and the 5th season really only got shown when it made it to syndication. They'd kind of given up on the show after they'd gotten done filming the 5th season. Born on April 12, 1946, Ed O'Neill. He played the doofus Al Bundy on Fox's Married with Children, and he also starred as Jay Pritchard on Modern Family. He briefly worked as a social studies teacher before pursuing acting. He is a martial arts black belt in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and was also almost a professional football player. He got cut during training camp. So years and years ago, there was a movie called Flight of the Intruder, which I saw the preview for it while seeing some other movie, and it was supposed to be coming out in like 2 or 3 months. I'm a military buff. I could hardly wait to see the movie, and it never came out. And this was back before the internet, so I was like, I wonder what happened there. Years later, I found out that they cast Ed O'Neill as this angry commander of this naval ship, and he's supposed to be yelling at people. Well, in test audiences, since he was on Married with Children and everyone saw him as a doofus, he was sort of typecast at the time, and whenever he came out, people started laughing, and they eventually had to recast that part and release it like a year later. Good movie, though. It had William Dafoe in it. And the person that took his part replaced Ed O'Neill, Danny Glover. The movie also had Ving Rhames, Tom Sizemore, and Rosanna Arquette. But it's Ed O'Neill's birthday. Died on April 12, 1981, Joe Louis, widely regarded as one of the best boxers of all time. He compiled a career record of 66-3 and reigned as the world heavyweight champion from 1937 to 1949. Over a decade. He actually went to a vocational school where he's learning how to be a cabinet maker before his boxing career took off. He won 25 of his title defenses during his career, setting a long-standing record. He had a long and much publicized rivalry with Max Schmeling, and after their careers, the two fighters became very close friends. When he died in 1981, Max Schmeling paid for it. Paid for the ceremony and reception and all that stuff. Not only that, he was in the military for a while, and there's certain things you have to accomplish or do to be buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Ronald Reagan waived all the requirements and just had him buried there. 2 of his 3 losses were one was to Max Schmeling, another guy I don't know about, but the big one was his final one, where he lost to Rocky Marciano. Joe Louis, whose actual real name was Joe Louis Barrow, died of cardiac arrest in Desert Hot Springs Hospital near Las Vegas on April 12, 1981, just hours after his last public appearance viewing the Larry Holmes and Trevor Berbick fight. And Max Schmeling also served as one of his pallbearers. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a productive day, be nice to each other.